I suppose I was asking for trouble as I walked back from the Trav Food automat on the south side of FeyTown. It felt pretty good knowing I'd gotten my client the information he needed, and had gotten paid for it too. Not only did I help a dwarf resolve his problems while building a bit of good reputation for people like myself with the Fey folk, but I'd also managed to finish it 3 days ahead of schedule. They say hindsight's 20/20, so looking back, it's fairly easy to wonder why the gray clouds moving in on my silver lining caught me by surprise. In this case, the gray clouds were actually more of an olive drab. There were two of them. They were stopping people at the gate stones at the edge of the FeyTown and asking them questions, none too gently. I'd not seen the more vocal of the two before today, and figured he must be a raw recruit eager to prove himself, but the other one I knew well. I'd shared rations with him once upon a time. It was a waste of perfectly good rations. The kid swooped in on some down-on-his-luck character that looked more like a scarecrow, dressed in ragged, patched clothing, and scraggly straw-like hair spread around his dirty face. He'd been sitting on the sidewalk outside of the gate stones with a tin cup. I caught the kid's words, obstructing justice. Tell me where he is and we'll forget we ever saw you. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just sitting here. I have nowhere else. I have nothing else, the pile of rags whimpered. Well, you don't have this spot either. Get your filth off of our streets, the one I recognized said as he picked up the beggar and bodily threw him through the gate stones onto the street, and then picked up the tin cup, emptying the change into his hand before throwing it at the beggar on the ground. He pocketed the money and then looked at his hands in disgust before trying to wipe them clean on his handkerchief. The beggar picked up his cup and shambled around the corner in the nearest building, trying to find protection. But Tanner and his little thug had already turned their backs and seemingly forgot anything on this side of the gate stones existed. I made my way after the beggar and tried to avoid the attention of Tanner and his lackey, who set their sights on some errand boy coming back into FeyTown. As I turned down the alley after the beggar, I saw an empty dead end and chuckled. This was a classic, and I wasn't fooled in the least. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a stick of chalk, quickly sketched out a simple bind rune on the ground at the mouth of the alley. Standing up, I spoke the name of the root rune, and in answer, the second rune appeared, in a glow only I could see, on a figure pressed up against the south wall about 10 feet down the alley. I casually walked up to the man and looked him square in the face. Who are they looking for? I asked. How? He suddenly appeared, looking surprised that I saw him. A trick I picked up in the war. Pulled a couple $50 out of my pocket and held them up. Who? I don't know any specifics. They just said that one of their guys went AWOL. Somebody they called Walters or something. He stammered, looking at the coins hopefully. Calvin Walters? That's the name they yelled. You sure about that? I'm not likely to forget it. They yelled it at me and then threatened me with construction of justice and stuff. I handed him the coins and walked away, letting the rune go and the man fade back into the wall. I looked down the street to try to catch a glimpse of the olive drab figures that were there moments ago, but they were gone by this point. If Cal had really gone AWOL, there was more likely places to check before coming here to bother the residents of FeyTown, and Tanner knew that. Something was off, and I was going to figure out what it was. I crossed the granite threshold of the gate stones and headed south in the city on foot. It took me less than 10 minutes of walking to find myself outside the used bookstore, which would be the first place anybody would go looking for Cal. Stepping inside, I took a look around, noticing only an old couple and some kid in a leather jacket. After a few minutes, the owner came out of the back. He was tall for an elf, but not overly so, coming in at just an inch or two under my 5'9" height. He had the look of a man into his elderly years, and since he was an elf, that meant he counted his life in centuries, not decades. "I'm looking for somebody," I said, walking up to the man. "An author?" He looked at me curiously. "No, a customer." "Not very many of those right now," he smiled. "No, a specific person. A regular," I explained. Not a lot of people can be counted as a regular these days, what with the cinnamon all being more interesting than old books for most people. Looking around, I found myself wondering how an elf managed to afford keeping such a place open in a human city like this. But then, considering his age, he likely had a fair amount of money amassed over the years on which to draw from. "A guy named Calvin Walters." I turned back to the owner. Yes. I say he counts as a regular. One with quite an esoteric taste," he said cheerfully. "Rumor has it he's gone missing, and I'm not one for believing gossip and rumors, so I figured I should check with the people who would know." "Oh dear. That's very unfortunate to hear. I don't put much stock in rumors myself, and this is the first I've heard of it. Are your sources reliable?" "Well, I wouldn't trust my source with my lunch for 5 minutes, but considering he accosted people in the streets searching for Cal, who lives on the same base, it seems likely it might be worth looking for a few answers," I replied. As I talked, he kept looking over my shoulder, and at first I thought he was watching the kid who was in here when I came in. But taking a quick glance back, I noticed that both the kid and the old couple were gone. There was only one other customer in the place at this point, and it was Bruno. Bruno is just how most people know him. It just seemed unprofessional to have a leg breaker whose name was Matt Kent. I thought maybe I had an idea how this old elf might afford to keep a used bookstore open in a human city after all. Bruno walked up to where we were, pushed me aside, and rumbled, "We need to talk." The old man looked worried. "You still playing soldier, Scruffy?" I yelled up the street to Tanner to get his attention. He scowled at me with a look that I'm sure he thought was intimidating. "Watch what you call me, traitor. Unlike you, I still have rank," he snarled. "I'm sure it'll go away with a bath." A nearby pixie laughed wildly at that, which had Turner growling and moving to come at me. But he stopped just on the city side of the granite threshold between the gate stones on either side of the street. It was good to see that his hate of all things Fey left him unwilling to pass over the threshold. "You fellas are a little out of your usual territory, aren't you? Your buddy Walter's finally screwed up. I'm going to make sure he gets put down for the traitor he is. Care to make it my best day ever? Join him?" He smiled at me. "I'm an investigator. Investigator. You always were a bit sloppy with how you pronounce things. I left the service years ago and went into business for myself." "You mean for those critters?" Many of FeyTown's residents turned to glare at that. "I find people and information for clients. If the military offered me a case, I might take it." "All right, smart guy. Bring in your traitor buddy Walters. Either you or your bosses need to sign off on the paperwork for my fee. Once you got that worked out, then you have yourself a deal." He looked surprised at that. "You expect me to believe you'd actually hunt down the guy you covered for during the war?" "I'm not hunting anything." Tanner smiled smugly at that. "Walters is still working for the military. I said I'd bring him back to his post, and that's what I'll do." "I'll believe it when I see it," Tanner sneered. "You'll have to do more than that," I said. "You'll pay me." "All right, then. You're working for me now. I'll send a courier with your contract in a day or so." "No deal. Remember, I played cards with you. You cheat like hell. But we can still make this happen." I pulled out a folded form. "I just happen to have a contract right here. Sign it, and we're in business. You don't get anything until Calvin Walters is back on the base. If you try to interfere or try to cheat, then I get my fee and something more, I said back to him. Tanner looked over the contract, wrote in what he wanted and where he wanted it delivered, and signed it. As did I. When and where was he last seen, I asked. You're the detective. Figure it out. Pleasure doing business, I said, walking back into FeyTown. As I walked away, I heard the kid ask him, You don't actually cheat at cards, do you? There were only a few places I could think that Calvin would go when he was allowed off base. The first one on the list would involve heading back southward and dealing with those two. I figure I still had time to work my way down that direction from one of the other locations. The walk to the grocer was short enough that I really didn't have enough time to figure out a motive for Calvin to go AWOL so suddenly. Something was wrong here. And I'd have looked into this case for free, but Scruffy paying me to do it was a nice bonus. The store was a tiny little space, piled high with fruits and other non-refrigerated goods. The owner, Mac, was sitting on the stoop by the door next to the cart with flower arrangements on it. The flowers were likely the reason Cal found this place the first time, and Mac's broad, friendly smile and laughing greetings to customers was likely what kept him coming back. Hey, you must be Mac. If I'm not, he's going to be pretty upset that I've been in bed with his wife, he replied with a belly-bouncing laugh. Well, let's hope for your sake that you are then, I smiled. Or at least, that you managed to get away before he finds out. Am I getting old, he asked me with a grin. I was a bit puzzled by that, he went on. I know all my customers by name. You know who I am, but I have no idea who you are. No, you wouldn't know me, but you do know a friend of mine. Do tell. Calvin. Oh yeah, that Calvin is a good kid. In here buying flowers for his girl on the regular, he smiled. He was here the night before last, as a matter of fact. He was here the other night? I hadn't expected that. Yeah, he seemed a bit more tense than usual. I think he was planning on popping the question. I hope she said yes. That kid deserves to be happy with somebody. Pop the question? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He bought 2 flower arrangements and kept putting his hand in his pocket to check on the ring. He smiled. He was in a hurry and took the shortcut down the alley behind the store so he wouldn't be late. Proposing? I had no idea. He never mentioned it, that I can remember. Oh, he never said it to me either, but sometimes you can just tell, Mac smiled. I went and checked out the table of flowers to see if there was anything worth seeing there. He'd been here and gone missing in the last 48 hours, and when he was here, he'd been nervous. It felt like the flowers were some kind of clue. He bought more flowers than usual and headed down the alley, I said to myself. I'd pay Mac F5 for some flowers, telling him to keep the change. I felt like he deserved it for the lead. Now the question was, do I tell Tanner, or do I go this one alone? If the old guy knew anything, he was playing it quiet. I wasn't going to get much from him. It certainly wasn't worth getting in the way of Bruno and his employer's business to find out what the old bookseller knew. It's a big city. There were likely to be answers to be found elsewhere. I turned and left the bookstore, thinking about where to head to next. Cal had his favorite places to visit off base, and he might be at any one of them right now, or have been there recently anyway. But it didn't do me any good to go to the park if there was nobody there to see him regularly, and also be there to tell me about seeing him when I went looking. I figured my best bet was likely to go to the grocer's 3 blocks west and 2 blocks south of here, or the pub 4 blocks east. All right, Bruno, let's talk, I said, getting back in front of him. Camden, I shouldn't be surprised to see you associating with critters, but I'm genuinely amazed you know how to read. Bruno seemed to notice me for the first time. Oh, reading is great. Lots of interesting things to be learned by reading, I replied. Try reading the hints I'm throwing you right now. Oh, I got your hints, big guy. I'm more interested in reading your future. I got my chalk out of my pocket slowly and quietly while he was trying to intimidate me by staring me down. Imagine it must be fascinating to somebody who doesn't have a future themselves, he said. You must be reading things wrong, Bruno. Here, this is my future. I drew a bind rune on my lapel, and then reached forward as if to write on his. I said, and this is... Taking the bait, Bruno swung his fist back before driving it straight into my face. Ah! What did you do to my hand? He staggered backwards, clutching his broken hand in pain. I didn't do anything to your hand, Bruno. If you'd just listened to what I was trying to tell you, you might have known better than to punch me. But I guess you're just being hard-headed. Oh, no, wait, that was me, I said, making him back up towards the door. You're a real riot, you are. Is that brick wall head of yours harder than a bullet, Camden? A tree. What? A tree, not a brick wall, I corrected him. You're an idiot that doesn't know how to take a hint. You know that, Camden, right? He sneered. So people keep telling me, but I'm not sure what they're getting at. I smiled and reached forward with the chalk. Bruno stumbled backwards down the stairs to the sidewalk outside where his backup guys had been looking out while he was inside. I closed the door and locked it before scrawling another rune on the frame and turning my back to them. Went over to the old man. You just bought me more trouble, mister. He looked worried. I wouldn't worry too much about Bruno there. He's not going to let this go, I smiled. That's what I'm worried about. They're going to destroy everything I own and kill me when they get back in here, he said, while pacing and holding his head. Ha, trust me, he's already forgotten about you. He's focused on me right now. So if you and I can be useful to one another for a bit longer, I'll make sure that his focus remains elsewhere and you can have a bit of time to resolve whatever you need to do with his boss. His boss? This isn't anything to do with whoever that man works for. Do you honestly think for a minute that it's just coincidence that some human thug in a suit is in the only store on the street owned by an elf trying to intimidate him? Well, that's even better. What do you people call people who think like you? Lunatics? He snapped. That one actually made me flinch. I could pretend it was subtle enough that he didn't notice, but he did. I'd be lying if I said he didn't. He realized he struck a nerve, and to his credit, he looked a little embarrassed at his insulting me. If it's Bruno and his sidekicks out there on their own who are hassling you, I can resolve that easily enough. I waved back his protests. And just so you know, I'm not rescuing you by doing it. I'm doing it for me. I just figured that you'd like to know what Bruno's future was, so you don't spend time thinking he's around the corner when he won't be. You are a professional killer? He asked with a look of distaste. Not anymore. Not for some decades now. I saw some sad understanding cross his face for a second. These days I'm a private investigator most of the time. Today, I'm looking into the disappearance of an old buddy of mine. Calvin? Calvin. I wasn't misleading you when I said I'd not heard of his disappearance. But he talked about the fact he was increasingly certain the military intended to dispose of him. He talked about escaping the country, but he needed to convince somebody to go with him when the time came. Did he have a plan of escape in place, I asked. You'd have to ask the mystery girl who he refused to leave without. Find out who she is, and if she's gone too, and you'll have your clue as to what happened to him. But you think he didn't get away. I can't say either way. But he was stuck between sides in a war that went cold but never went out. If the military didn't dispose of him, there's a good chance certain FeyTown clans did the job instead. You should have left without her, man said. No argument there. Alright, which FeyTown clan or clans had their eye on taking him out? You don't get to be as old as I am by being stupid, he scowled. I have no intention of becoming part of a foundation of some East Side warehouse project. He turned around and went into the back of the store, our conversation apparently over. I turned around and headed to the door. The rune had held against attempts to break the door in, and all the noise that likely occurred during the attempts. I'd be sorely disappointed if they'd just given up. I actually needed them. I stepped out to hail a cab and caught the 3 men out of the corner of my eye. Good, they were seething and stalking me. The cab pulled up and I told the driver I needed to go talk to somebody at.
Hey guys, this is part of a series of videos that I was going to do You Choose Adventures and single-player role-playing games played through YouTube. And I'd built up these concepts, I'd scripted out multiple stories that required video techniques, actors, props, animations, the whole 9 yards on some of that stuff, and unfortunately they all depended heavily on annotations, and they are now pretty much impossible the way I planned them. They have to be re-scripted in some cases to allow me to find some other way to do them. And if you guys have any suggestions on how to do this type of video in the future, please comment below, because I have science fiction, fantasy, superhero, cyberpunk stories that I really wanted to share with you guys. And I broke this story that you just saw into a few pieces. The first one I'm going to use the annotations as I intended to try to get it up by May 2nd, where the deadline is you can't use annotations anymore. The next couple sections will be attempts to try an alternative means of doing the same thing. I want to finish this first one in this setting by the end of the month, and then start a proof of concept of the role-playing game that I wanted to do, which I also scripted out. And the script for that role-playing game and the script for this one, they've all been done this month over 2 days of about 6 to 8 hours each day. So this is a bit of a rush job, and I'm sorry about that to a certain degree, but I'm really hopeful that I at least get this out there and share it with you guys, because it's something I really wanted to do for a while, and I was really excited about doing, and I'm trying to scramble to find a way to make it happen now that I no longer have the feature that I was going to rely heavily on for it. But the ideas for both of these are ideas that I actually pulled from some of my other videos, which are writing prompts for stories, movies, games, videos, and those types of things. So if you want to check out some of that stuff, check out some of my other videos. I definitely would love to see anybody create something from those concepts. And if you guys want to see any of that stuff in future You Choose Adventures, let me know. I'm going to be working towards doing some of this stuff in the future. It's a little backburnered right now because I have to re-figure out how to do this all over again. It's a little unfortunate, but I'm back on board with the idea of doing this in the future. I haven't given up on it. I'm trying to work out a new way to do this. So, like I said, if you have suggestions on how to do that, let me know down below in the comments. And hopefully, I will be able to make some more of this in the future. I was actually thinking about if I wanted to continue this series, this video that you just saw is the first section of a standalone story that has potential of some sequels. So if you like this story, character, or settings, and you want to see future You Choose Adventures in this setting, let me know in the comments below or with a like, and I'll see about creating more in this setting in the future. So, thanks for watching, and hope to see you in the future. Take care.